We're back in the Raleigh garden after 2 months. We were actually on the road for 2 months. We been to 33 states and 2 provinces and worked on the road. We filmed in Philadelphia and Cleveland and Portland and Dallas and Alabama. Some things you will have seen already, some things you will have not seen already, but it's kind of a wild ride. And the entire time we were gone, I'm getting reports from the garden, and I have video on the garden. It's looking really good the entire time. Like the annuals are still going crazy, and tons of pollinators out here, I'm sure, that entire time. And 3 days before we got home, we had our first freeze here of the season, which I'm kind of glad to get. Maybe if you're watching the Q&A after this video, I'll probably address that a little bit. I'm really happy to have gotten a mild freeze, but it has knocked a lot of the annual color back that we would have walked back in almost in full color. I'm not going to cut this stuff down. I might cut a few things down here or there, and you'll see that in videos in the next week or two as we get the garden cleaned back up. But there are a crazy amount of birds out here right now. And I would imagine we've got some 70-degree days coming, so I think some of the open flowers that remain that didn't get damaged will have some pollinators on them, but it's mostly about birds right this second. When I walked through here, I just came back into the garden from walking Griffin, and like 20 birds took off out of here. So they're taking full advantage of all the flowers we had all season, all the seeds that are out here in the garden. Well, we're gonna jump around and show you a few things that are looking really great here as we walked back in. A few of them are camellias. I mean, this is a peak time for Camellias sasanquas, typically, our fall blooming camellias. Typically peak here in mid-October to about the 1st of December here in the Raleigh area. If you're further south, there's zone 7 to 9. If you're further south, sometimes that can shift all the way into December. These are 2 of the dwarf Bobby Green selections. This is October Magic Shishi, or October Magic White Shishi, I should say, which has this beautiful double white flower on it. It's got a lot more buds on it that haven't opened yet, but it is not open quite as much as the light pink Shishi. The light pink Shishi, I saw when I was driving down the road here. Great plant. I don't know how many growers are growing this plant yet. These smaller growing, slower growing camellias are sometimes not as favored by some of the growers just because they can take a season longer sometimes to get of size on them. To get them to a garden center and have them look like something that people would want to buy. And so there's a little bit, I think there's a gap in the market for some of these lower growing, smaller growing, more compact camellias, but these 2 have been here for 4 to 5 years at this point, and they are still super, super compact. You'll get a couple limbs that'll pop up above everything else, but I can just cut those out whenever. Tons of flower buds left on this thing. It'll be flowering for several more weeks, and the white one I think will catch up here as it's getting a little bit warmer. There is one, what's this, crimson and clover, right? There's crimson and clover back here, and I had actually cut this one fairly hard. It was in a lot of shade. That has kind of rectified itself because we took out a couple of things over here, and now it's a much fuller plant, but I did cost myself some flower buds on it this year. But now it's a much better looking plant than it originally was. I had put it in here and it was a little too dark, and it went stretched out this high. It had a few more flowers on it, but it was a very thin, wispy plant. But now you can see, I think it's a much nicer plant, and I think next year it will really be full-on flowered. Our neighbor's red maple back here, I think the wind came, the wind comes this direction, and so we have a million seeds from that. When that red maple's not in the best of health, they've been cutting it off the power lines. Can they see that at all, Steph, up there where how that weird tree has been cut on? Plus it's in a dry front garden. I think those roots have probably run every direction they can run, and so the tree's just under general stress. It has thrown a million seeds in this garden. Our front steps over there that I'll show you right now are just absolutely covered in that seed. So we're gonna be picking some red maples next year. So you can see up here on the porch what I'm talking about with all this you know, this stuff flew everywhere. So I just can't imagine. We pull these red maples up out of the ground every season, but there's a lot this year. So we've got to get in here and clean up. There's leaves everywhere, literally. Walk in, start filming here. But two things we left out intentionally are these aloes. This is Safari Rose and this is Safari Sunrise. I'll pull this one over just a bit. Safari Sunrise has this slightly wider blade on it. These aloes are really pretty easy to grow. They like to have their roots restricted just a bit, meaning that, you know, a lot of things that are this full in a container, we might have already potted up into a larger container, but this, we'll leave them slightly restricted. That seems to help them flower and also prevents me from overwatering them, because water is kind of the enemy of these. And then the other thing is they need some cool weather in the fall to flower. So if we'd have put these inside, we put our houseplants, most of our houseplants inside, and then we had somebody come and help get the rest inside as we knew it was getting colder here. But if we'd have put these aloes inside 2 months ago before we left, they may have not gotten the trigger to actually flower. So they need shorter days and that combination with some cooler nights, and that triggers the flowering. And you can see how many flowers this Safari Rose is actually going to have. We're a week or two away. These can actually be used as cut flowers. You can cut these out and put them in, you know, bring them inside. I don't want this exposed to like 20 degrees. Okay, so there's a delicate balance here where that 32 degree night we had was absolutely perfect without actually damaging the plant. Again, you can see how root restricted it is at this point. It's absolutely filled this pot completely. Don't know whether I'll repot. This one's almost to the point where it is time to repot it, but if it does get repotted, it'll barely get into a larger pot. I want to keep it if it's slightly root restricted and then get some cool air in it in the fall, you can do this. You can get them to come into absolute full flower. This one's just getting started. I don't know if you could see, Steph showed you the up close of one, but this one's doing the exact same thing. So we've got tons more flowers coming. There's one right there, and then down a little lower right there. You can see another one coming. So this one will also come into full flower. But what triggered it was some cool nights that we had along the way. Last year it was hard to come by. Last year it just stayed warm through November and then just crashed on us in December. But this was the perfect scenario here of just backing off slowly with shorter days and cooler nights, and then boom, these come into full flower. One other thing you can see with me sitting in this spot is this Ruth Bancroft Ficus has really taken off. We thought we had lost it last winter because of that rapid cold change, killed it to the ground. The year before that, it had actually kind of stayed evergreen through the winter, and then this year it got killed to the ground and was like, well, we may have lost it. But we didn't lose it, and it's really starting to eat some space. I think we're going to have to add some control to it. But like Steph has said, it'll be interesting with some older wood, if it doesn't get killed back to the ground, that it might actually have time to fruit next year. So we would see. This is a combination of a fruiting fig, and then, which is Ficus carica, and then Ficus pumila, which is like a vining plant that you'll see in the South on brick walls and on any kind of surface that can kind of adhere to. But this one doesn't have those hold fast. It's kind of the perfect medium between the two. So it's got a smaller leaf, obviously, than a fruiting fig, but a much bigger leaf than Ficus pumila. It's a strange cross between the two of them, and it's just such an interesting plant. It's kind of Steph really likes this plant. For me, this is we've lost a little control of it. It needs to have a bit of pruning on it. It's blocking my video camera a little bit from seeing my annuals too, that were right in this, the camera that's in this particular spot. This is what I would see when the wind was blowing, when I was looking at it. So it needs a little control added to it, but it will be interesting next year if we actually now have a plant that's substantial enough that maybe it could fruit. We have several Ericiums that were planted, or wallflower is a common name for this. There are perennials for us, but they don't like the heat of the summer. And so they were blooming beautifully in the spring, and then they took a break during the summer, and they just kind of they just weren't doing anything. And now here we are back home after 2 months on the road, and cool nights, shorter days, and they're back in full bloom. So, again, you get some of those perennials that really like the cool season, the shoulder seasons like that. Mexican salvia can be that way as well. One of the things that just was completely unstung by the cold weather here was this fireworks gomphrena. And again, this one is when we're starting from seed, and look how many flowers this is. In the evening, it's absolutely covered in moths. There's some moths that just go crazy for this particular gomphrena, and this was like 5 plants. And they're this big for like 2 months. I mean, they just don't do anything for the first 2 months they're in the ground. They're just getting their roots established, and then the rest of the season, we're cutting them off of things. The rest of the season, they just go so wild. But it's a great plant. It's self-cleaning. So this is, there's some annuals out here in the garden that are, require some maintenance in order to keep them looking good. This celosia would be one of those. If you wanted to, we, occasionally probably want to cut it to put fresh flowers on it. We don't. It will also, the fresh flowers will also be good for the pollinators. Some of these old flowers on these are used up, so the pollinators aren't still coming. But these gomphrena just seem to, I never see, just the next round of flowers just covers up the old round of flowers repeatedly. Highly recommend these. These 5 plants are covering 10 or 12 square feet. It's 5 seeds. That's what this is. It's not that very little expense in this. One little packet of seed can go a long way on this particular plant. We started on this perennial border between the vegetable garden and the new native garden back here, and a couple of the things over there are definitely bullies. That salvia that's in front of you is definitely a bully. It's still blooming, and so we'll just leave it up for pollinators for the next few weeks. But I will say that some of these spreading perennials that are bullies like this, I would dig them up now if I were you, and not wait till spring, because over the winter those roots will continue to expand, and when it comes back in the spring, it's going to be covering a much bigger area. We were in Europe and we saw this agastache right here quite a bit. This is Belicious pink. You see the big pink flowers on this agastache. This is a really, really good agastache. It was sent to us when we got back home. A friend of ours represents this plant in Europe and the US. I think you're going to see this Belicious pink all over the place. I planted it in the vegetable garden before we left, and it did that while we were gone. This place is a mess. It needs a lot of cleaning. You're gonna see a lot of that over the next couple of weeks. To the right of that, before we left, we were going through some seed, figuring out what seed we needed to order for next year, and some of the old leafy greens seed that we had. Steph just threw them out here in the vegetable garden before we left, so we're coming back home to some greens that we can eat. But if you have old seed like that, there's really no reason that you can't throw them out there and see what happens. If you've got a soil that's in pretty good shape, sometimes it may surprise you what will germinate from seed that's 4, 5, 6 years old at that point. We've got pomegranates. Steph will get a close-up when she comes around, but we do have a couple of pomegranates. They're not going to finish. It's already 32 degrees on them, but the thing's still flowering, which is kind of interesting. That again, some of these plants, they're from different places than Raleigh, and so they, the daylight triggers them to do something, the temperatures trigger them to do something, and it might be just kind of out of place or weird timing in your area just because it's not from there. But it's kind of weird to come home and see the pomegranates basically come back into full flower. The Marvel Mahonia is about to come into flower. Depends on how cold it gets, how quickly it gets, whether all these flowers will open up or not. Sometimes they'll do it before we get the cold of January, and sometimes afterwards. But they tends to be able to hold in place if it needs to, and just open up later. But you can see these these flower clusters on. When they can just get this big in time, and it's just wacky how many flowers this Marvel Mahonia actually gets. I'm going to slide this back some. When we initially planted this here, we've got 5 or 6 more feet of space back here behind it, but it wasn't cleared out at that time. When we initially did this, we had this temporary fence back here. We were keeping Griffin in a bit too, because Griffin we'd like to have him out here more, but he has a tendency to, make bigger and bigger circles until he's not in the garden anymore. And so that's come around now where he's a bit more, you know, he's with us all the time. He can be out here more now. But this needs to slide back ultimately. So probably this next spring, I'm literally just going to cut this thing in half, dig it up and slide it to the back. It'll have plenty of time to come back out and flower next year. But these Mahonia are interesting just because they're winter plants for pollinators. So we'll have, you know, 70-degree day, a few of these flowers will open and you'll see bees all over them. It's kind of interesting how, you know, how these plants are able to do this and do it in cold. I think this one's zone 6 hardy. A lot of the other, you know, like the narrow leaf versions, like the soft caress over there, those are zone 7 hardy. You can see all these leaves. This oak and other things back here, you know, put tons of leaves on everything. But if I take these leaves off, you can start to see the flowers are forming here on the soft caress as well. So another great pollinator plant. Well, this one's not quite as cold hardy, so that's a zone 7 plant. But if you want one of these winter flowering Mahonia for zone 6, Marva would be a good choice if you can find it. Bit prickly, but I mean, I prune it once a year. You know, I don't think I did prune it this past year. But so, I mean, it's once a year, put on a pair of gloves, be careful with it. Other than that, you don't have to mess with it, so who cares if it's prickly, really. It's not like some roses where you're constantly doing something to them all season and you have to get into the thorns. But man, when this thing comes into flower, you know, and again, it might happen before Christmas, it might happen in mid-January. It'll just, some ability to just kind of stop itself in place if it needs to. But once they open, the pollinators go crazy for it. The oak is definitely piled leaves everywhere out here, so we'll get all that cleaned up pretty quickly in the next few days. We do leave our leaves in place, but that particular tree is so big that it would drown the back garden in leaves. So what I'll do is we'll clean up the paths, and any place they're a little too thick, we'll probably break them or blow them out to the driveway and then run them over with a lawnmower. It's the only time I need to use a lawnmower in a year. Other ways to do that as well. You could get a tub grinder and all kinds of things. You can grind up some of these leaves, but I don't want them this thick, but I don't want to get rid of them either. One of the other standouts here in the garden, and we have a couple of these. This is a lomeandra called Platinum Beauty, and we've shown it on the channel quite a few times. We had one in a container for 3 years, and we finally got a winter that killed it. These don't like winter wet. They're Australian natives. They're great for the Southwest United States. They're great for places if you have sharp drainage, so if you were in sandy soil somewhere in warmer areas, as long as they don't stay overly wet, they tend to be completely hardy here. Out of the ground, so I really can't put this in the ground. We're on a completely flat lot with clay-based soil. So it's like, it's just not going to work through the winter here. So we need to leave it as a container plant. The container leaves it a little bit more exposed to cold, which can also be an issue. But again, we've had one last for 3 years without the winter killing it. So again, it continues to be a standout. This beautiful variegation, moves around in the wind, really easy plant. And this is a plant in a container. We took a bunch of our other container plants and put it in that vegetable garden. So you saw that agastache over there. There's also a bunch of Japanese maples and other things in there because I couldn't go 2 months without watering them in a container potentially. Didn't know how dry it was going to be. This, I watered it before I left, and it could have probably not rained the whole time almost, and it would have still been fine. So this is a really good plant for this. There's one called Miner's Gold that we also have. That's a gold foliage one, soft textured, a little bit softer textured than this one. I think it's also going to be super popular. But for those of you who it might be wet in the winter, these are definitely zone 8 to 10 plants, really, zone 7B to 10 plants. But if you're in one of those areas, if you're in an area that might be wet during the winter, then these are good container plants. If you're in an area that has sharp drainage year round, they can just go in the ground. But that Miner's Gold, I think, is going to be like Everillo Carex, but for full sun or part shade. I think that one's really going to be super popular. The last plant we'll show off in this video is our spider's web Fatsia. And then again, you'll see us cleaning this place up here over the next few videos. It only takes a few. We have a very low maintenance garden here. The main thing I want to do is just go through some of these plants, and I'll knock some leaves off of them, you know, down to the ground. I'll rake some of them out where I think it's going to be a little bit too thick. We're going to cut some annuals down that are no longer flowering or any kind of seed for the birds. We'll pull some others. You'll see it coming up in some videos, but this is a pretty low maintenance place. It went 2 months with 0 maintenance other than someone coming and helping put a few houseplants in the house when we saw it was going to actually get down to right at freezing. And other than that, nothing. And I think about 3 hours. We throw 3 hours at this and it'll be back to looking pretty good. This is a spider's web Fatsia. I've talked about this several times over the years about when we put it in this spot. I put it in November and it just got absolutely nuked that first winter. I thought it was virtually dead, and it took a year for it to grow back out of that. Sometimes those stress events can take a long time, but it was rooting the whole time, and now it's really taken off. I will say on this spider's web Fatsia, it's a variegated one, and the leaves are all over the place. I think if you grew 5 of these, you'd think you had 5 different plants. Some of them have more white in them. Sometimes the leaves have more white in them than they do now. Sometimes they're almost solid green. When I see these for sale anywhere, it's an interesting plant. I think it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely beautiful, but there is some variability in this one. You know, the consistency of the variegation is a little bit different, but it does come into flower, and this is one of the fun flowering plants here in the garden because it tends to bloom in November. There's things like this, like the October Magic Orchid, Camellia back here, still has a few flowers on it, but we missed the peak flower on it. You know, again, so Camellias, Farfugium, we have a Farfugium on the back line that had bloomed while we were gone. We just saw the Mahonia coming into flower. I love these winter flowering, interesting things, and this is one of them. Warm day, it's supposed to be 70 degrees tomorrow. We'll have bees all over this plant. If they can find it, they will be all over it. We've heard literally in December before, walked past one of these and you could hear the bees on a very large Fatsia when they're in full bloom like that. They have these alien-like flowers, these umbels, so that all those little individual flowers come from a center point like that, creating that kind of circle. You know, just kind of DNA looking or some sort of, you know, scientific thing you're looking at here. You know, they're all perfectly designed like that. The flowers open, bees go crazy for them. Our Fatshedra, which is a cross between Fatsia japonica and ivy, is not blooming yet. This is a little early. Typically it's December when we're seeing these in flower. I don't know what triggered this one to bloom a little bit earlier, but it's pretty much in almost peak flower at this point. But it takes several years. Your Fatsia may take several years to actually flower like this, but once it does, really kind of a fun plant to watch flower at a season. You know, very little else is probably going on in the garden, or you're, you know, cleaning up from, you know, the first frost or freeze, and that's when this thing gets exciting in the garden. The other thing is we've got several Encore Azaleas out here that are still blooming as well, and we saw that all over the southeast as we were moving around heading home from Dallas to here. Encore Azaleas are, you know, showing off right here in fall. So there you go. Is there anything in your garden that's still looking good? That's, you know, the fun thing. Some of the conifers are coming on out here too. You know, as some of these other things are going to sleep, the conifers will become one of the center points here in the garden. Let us know down below what's exciting in your garden. If there's anything left that you're still enjoying after maybe a first frost has happened in your garden. And again, thank you guys for following all the content that we did on the road. There's probably a few more videos from that, and then you'll see home garden content as we recover from not being here for 2 months and start planning for next spring. We've got a bunch of bulbs going in. We've got seed orders in. We picked up seed. We did a video at a seed company on the road. You guys saw that. Like a lot of planning and that kind of thing that will go into this following spring. The tickets for the open garden for next year are already on the website, and we also have a new t-shirt on the website as well for those of you who are big time maple fans. I added that to the website yesterday, and there's a couple more t-shirts coming as well. So thank you for following along with all that, and again, lots of upcoming content back in the home garden. Thanks guys.